You're listening to the Woman of Value podcast. You are about to hear the story of a woman who is following her dreams and passions and creating positive change in the world.
I always felt that I couldn't make mistakes because I didn't have that degree yet. I felt that, oh gosh, people are going to assume that I'm not as smart as they are. I worked with people from Harvard and Yale and Princeton. And when you don't have a degree, you look at people like that and you think to yourself, my goodness, I can never say what they say the way they say it.
My guest today is Vicki Znavor. She is a former human resources officer, selected by Crain's Chicago business in 2020 as a notable HR leader and one of the most powerful Latinas in 2019. She serves on several not-for-profit boards focusing on literacy and alleviating human suffering. She's the author of Authenticity, Reawakened, The Path to Owning Your Life Story and Fulfilling Your Purpose, which was published in January of 2015. Welcome to the show, Vicki.
Oh, thanks so much, Sandy. It's great to meet you.
So we're going to ask you the first question I ask everyone. What does woman of value mean to you?
Your value has absolutely nothing to do with what you do for a living. I think that often subconsciously, we know that we're incredibly powerful, so much so that it can scare the heck out of us. And so my hope is that we can embrace rather than fear that power and use it to live our best, most authentic lives and to help others do the same.
So that's interesting that you start with, we're incredibly powerful and we know it.
Yes.
So many people don't really know it. So what about those people who are saying, well, that's not me. I don't think I'm very powerful.
I think that this is a good sign then to do some self-exploration. My book really does try to help you do just that, in that I believe that when you start exploring, even if you start with the most basic components of your own life story, what are the 5 to 7 pivotal moments in your life? And you've talked, Sandy, before about pivotal moments on your show, but looking back at those pivotal moments, when you look back at those moments that you believe have had a huge impact on who you are, you start having a deep appreciation for, what you've experienced, the strength that it took to move through those experiences and continue growing and continuing on your path, the fortitude, the persistence, the perseverance. And once you start recognizing all of those things, I do think that you start to, at least, generally speaking, to come up with sort of a deeper appreciation for that path that you've been on. And that's a great way to start.
That's a really good way to start.
Yes.
I remember in coaching school, we did this exercise of pivotal moments, and it was a way to help us identify our values. Mm-hmm. And we had to do homework, and we had to coach somebody before the next class. And so the class was over the weekend. So Saturday night, I'm on the train from New York City back to Connecticut, where I live. And I have laryngitis. I can barely speak. And I'm like, I won't have time to coach anyone. I have to find someone on the train. So I found a total stranger and I said, I'm taking this coaching program, and can you work with me here on your pivotal moment? It was fascinating. She totally opened up. She talked about, I think it was a time when she had to give up a baby for adoption or something. I'm just like totally blanking on what it was because it was so many years ago, but it was like she went really vulnerable and deep with me, and what she learned about herself in that moment and her own personal strength. And yeah, so it is fascinating. And I've done this work with clients, and especially with younger clients. Like I've worked with a few younger people and people who really are confused about next steps. And so looking at those pivotal moments, because people will often say, like, I haven't done anything, or I'm nobody, right? And it's like, oh, you've been amazing.
Exactly. Yeah. And you've gone through so many things already. I mean, some of my pivotal life moments, I can go back to the age of about, I would say 3 maybe, but I can remember a huge pivotal moment in my life that occurred when I was around 8 years old. And that was I was literally sitting in a closet I grew up in a very chaotic home. I'm the youngest of 12 children. My parents struggled with alcohol addiction, and there just wasn't a lot of consistency in my home. But I remember sitting in my closet at home for, I don't know why I was in my closet, but I was sitting there and I just told myself, my life is going to be different. It's not going to look like this. And that moment stuck with me forever, that I think it was sort of the catalyst for, okay, I've got to pay attention in my life because I'm the only person really that I can depend on.
Mm. So that's it's really interesting at such a young age that you were able to do that. But it also points to your resilience and your desire to get unstuck and to have a better life, which is, I'm sure that was hardwired into you, which made you into the person you are today.
Yeah. And, we all are hardwired. And I think the reason why I put the title of the book is Authenticity Reawakened, the path to owning your life story and fulfilling your purpose. The reason why I put the word reawakened in the title is that I think, and you've talked about this before, Sandy, too, in many of your shows, in that life gets a hold of you. And you start doing things, and you're going to school, you get a job, you're busy, you're constantly sort of being molded, and you're conforming to what you think that people expect of you. And you lose yourself along the way. And the more years that pass, and the more that time that has gone by where you haven't done some self-reflection on who you are and what you stand for, the more you lose yourself. So this whole reawakening is something that happens multiple times over our lifetimes, if we're lucky, actually, because you can go many years without ever having analyzed anything, because, sometimes life's trappings can sort of gloss over the fact that we've lost ourselves. So we have money, we have material things, and that type of thing, and we just sort of forget. But at the end of the day, we all have to look ourselves in the mirror and say, who am I? And am I living up to my purpose? Are my values apparent in how I'm living my life? Those types of things. So, yes, there was resilience involved from the time I was 8 going forward, but probably the resilience came from the fact that I did have so much chaos, and it was really more a survival technique than anything else.
I can relate to that.
Uh-huh. Yes.
And it's interesting because you came from a family of 12.
12 kids.
That's a lot of kids. And I came from a family of only 4, but the chaos is there because of the inconsistencies on some level and family trauma, which most of us experience. And it's also really always interesting to see how all the children end up. Right. So in your family, how many of your siblings would you say really went on to live a self-reflective, more authentic, healthier life?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So I don't talk a lot about my siblings because I feel like their stories are their stories. I will say, however, and my mother was married 3 times. And so most of the children that, most of my siblings were from other parents besides my dad. My dad and my mom had just 2 children together. But, I would say most of them did go on to be, fairly healthy, productive citizens. Reflective, not all.
Yeah. So I think what happens often in these types of family chaotic environments is people become productive and they become almost invulnerable because productivity and success is something that keeps you safe. And actually looking within is a lot more vulnerable. And so did you have your kind of moment where you've discovered that deeper part of you?
Yeah, Sandy, that is so spot on. So I was the quintessential perfectionist. So, just to give you a little bit of background, because of my family situation, I was a very good high school student, but I didn't have the ability to go to college right after high school. I went right to work, and this was the late 70s. And back then you could get a decent job without a college degree. But college was always sort of a distant dream. So when I was 21 years old, I worked for a company, Sara Lee Corporation, actually, and they had tuition reimbursement. So I thought, oh, this is my chance. So I literally went to school for 15 years at night while I was working and raising my daughters. I have 3 daughters. And it took 15 years to get my degree that way. But it didn't really matter, in terms of, at the end of my life, I still probably will say that was fine timing, and it was a fine way to do things. It didn't matter. I went on to grad school too, but I think it's this, continuing to say, what am I striving for? I always felt that I couldn't make mistakes because I didn't have that degree yet. I felt that, oh gosh, people are going to assume that I'm not as smart as they are. I worked with people from Harvard and Yale and Princeton. And when you don't have a degree, you look at people like that and you think to yourself, my goodness, I can never say what they say the way they say it. And I had an aha moment along that path where I came to the conclusion that that was very true. I was never going to say things in the same way that a Harvard, lawyer was going to say it. But it did not mean that I didn't have contributions to make and that I couldn't excel at the work that I was doing. And so over a period of some 26 years at that one company, I was able to progress really high up and to actually be in the top 1% of 144,000 employees. So I was able to do very well for myself, but it was coming to that conclusion, continuing to work my way along. I always say in the story, The Tortoise and the Hare, I'm definitely the tortoise. And that was okay. But I learned to have confidence that I could make a contribution. And I think that so many people are able to make contributions in the workplace. It doesn't matter where you went to school. It doesn't matter what degree you have, but it does matter if you have your own voice and that you can, have a positive attitude and have the intention of contributing in a positive way. And I think it makes all the difference in one's career.
Yeah, I agree with that so much. I know that when in my dating and relationship coaching practice, so many people focus so much on the externals. He has to have a certain degree and that, or be a CEO of a company, and that will guarantee somehow that they'll have financial success and they'll be secure and safe. And that he'll be really smart. So they'll have great conversations. But I've met a lot of PhDs who are really not smart at all when it comes to relationships and having relationship skills, like being socially, connected and having emotional intelligence. And to me, you have to look beyond it. And I also lived many years with this insecurity that I wasn't smart enough. And it took me probably until I became a life coach where people were saying, you're so smart. And I think I used to think, oh, they're just being kind. They're just being polite. Or when my father would say, you're so beautiful. And I'd say, well, that's my father saying it. So I'm really not pretty, but he's my dad. So he's supposed to say that, so we tell ourselves all these limiting stories that aren't true. And so back to what you said at the beginning, that we do have power beyond what we believe.
Yes.
And I think in many ways, if we really looked at it, we're more afraid of a high degree of success than we are of hiding.
Oh, you are so right. Yeah. I mean, that because, there's security in sort of going along, being in a comfortable spot. I know at some points in my career, I definitely have had experiences where I've been able to, consider other opportunities. And I would sit back and say, oh my gosh, does this mean that I won't be able to spend more time with my kids? Or does this mean that the bar is so much higher now, I'm going to fail? I can remember being around probably 37, 38 years old, and I was so afraid of failing. Because I had, little things along my path that felt like a bunch of successes. But the terror, I would say, that came with the concept of possibly failing or not being great at something, even though I was operating at a much lower level. So I was, sort of I hadn't stretched myself yet. So I did start around that 37 years of age or so, start thinking to myself, you know what, I'm playing smaller than I should be. And failure does not mean that I'm a failure. It just means that I have more to learn. And when I started thinking about that, and then in my book, I write about fear as being something that gets in our way so much of the time. And I thought that Jack Canfield of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series books, he said it so well. And he said, fear is fantasized experiences appearing real. And that's exactly when I saw that in the last couple of years, I thought, that's exactly true, because so much of these stories we build up in our head, if you don't do an assignment perfectly well, or you make a mistake, or just doesn't work out for whatever reason, look around, everybody does that.
Yeah, that perfectionist need to be perfect.
Yeah.
So many people from starting even. And I know for me, it was the public speaking, like I was petrified. And so I just didn't do it. I didn't want to be criticized. I didn't want to have people judge me. And then you hide, you play small, you don't share your voice, and you talked a few minutes ago about having your voice and having your message that people need to hear, and they won't hear it if you keep it in.
No, that's so true. And, there's a quote, I just started reading some of the books by Julia Cameron. She does the Artist Way books. And I just think those are so beautiful. But she said that perfection is fear in a fancy dress. And I just love that quote because it's so true that sometimes and we all have either been this person or we see other people doing it. It's got to be perfect, and we can't have any slippage from absolute perfection, and on and on and on and on it goes. But that really is, oh my gosh, if I make a mistake, someone's going to think I'm lesser than, I'm not going to be promoted, I'm going to be thought of as a loser, or whatever it might, those things that we tell ourselves, and they're just not true.
No, and everybody's got insecurities. It's
yes.
like you can, I've heard so many interviews with famous people, and at the end they always say, how did I do? Did I do okay? Like, I mean, I've been interviewed by people who check in with me afterwards. Was that okay? Was it okay? And it's like, God, just yes. Own
it. Yeah. And it's so much easier now to criticize people. And that's another reason why people are probably a little bit, gun shy, because, now everybody can give an opinion online. There's all this social media, and, you do your best, and inevitably someone is going to criticize you. And so that's the other thing I would say is just continue doing your best. No one can ask any more of you than that. Do your best. And if it falls short, then ask yourself, what did I learn from it? What can I take away from this? And, and do that.
Yeah, we spend so much time asking the wrong questions, like, why did this happen? Why did I say this? Why was I so stupid? Instead of, what can I learn? How is this going to help me get to that next level? And those are what I call high value questions. How can I learn? Why would I want to be in this situation again? How can I avoid this situation again?
No, for sure.
I do better? I mean, it's also like being able to give and receive feedback is part of that whole thing. It's like you want to hear from people how to improve, and you got to be open and vulnerable enough to accept feedback and to give feedback to, I belong to Toastmasters, and that's where I've helped. That's what really helped me with my public speaking fear and being able to be a better speaker and a better leader. And we had a meeting this past week, and we've been meeting on Zoom because of COVID. We're still on Zoom. And the Toastmaster who led the meeting is this lovely, lovely woman who is very deep, and she was reflecting on everything everyone said. And I was just like, okay, that's enough talking. And so I was the general evaluator of the meeting, and I had to give feedback about the whole meeting. And so I start with the positive, and then at the end I said, and one thing I would love for us to work on is less talking. We all have Zoom fatigue. We need to keep the meeting moving. And so less reflection on every single thing, because it can get really long. And the Toastmaster thanked me. She said, I
Yes.
really appreciate that. So when you give feedback in a kind way and somebody is actually looking to grow, it's the greatest gift you can give and receive.
Yeah. And I think it's, I spent years as a head of HR. And so oftentimes I would be involved in feedback conversations and things like that. And I would always tell our executives or others who were giving feedback, think about your intention, because we accept feedback from people that we know care about us. And when we think that someone's, quote, out to get us, or they don't have our best interests in mind, that's when feedback is difficult to receive. So I'm sure at your Toastmasters, they felt that you have a genuine desire to help the organization and to help, sort of have better, more effective conversations. So it's easier to hear.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we always have to preface any feedback with our intention.
Yes.
My intention is to build you up, not knock you down. My intention, because I care about you. So I'm going to have this conversation because I want you to succeed, not I want to shame you and have you fail and feel terrible about yourself. Right.
That's right. Yeah. It makes all the difference in the world.
It really does. So, Vicki, can you share some of the steps you took to fulfilling your own purpose so that our listeners can begin the process for themselves?
Sure. Well, I do believe, as I said, about these pivotal moments, and I think, really taken those to heart in my own lifetime, thinking about my experiences. I'm a very self-reflective person. I'm quite the introvert, actually. So these kinds of conversations are very new for me. And although I've had careers, my whole career, I've been in front of people talking a lot, but I'm an introvert by nature. The next is thinking about your values. I think that even though I never put them on paper until I actually wrote the book, it is important to understand what your values are. And the reason it's so important to understand your values is that you have to decide what it is that you're going to stand up for and what you will not stand for. I used to have a boss years ago who would say, Vicki, is this a hill to die on? So most things are not hills to die on. But there are some things that are hills to die on, and you should understand what those are for yourself. With your values, this too, sometimes if you think about if somebody rubs you the wrong way and you can't really figure out why is that, every time I'm around this person, I feel irritated. It's probably because there's a values difference, and you have to sort of understand what that is. And then you can kind of assess whether this is such a big difference between the two of you and whatever it is your relationship is. If it's your boss and your values are just polar opposites, then you're probably not going to have a great working relationship. And that's something then that should sort of inspire you to try find something else to do or to work with somebody differently. But values are so important. So I do walk the reader through values. And then I do believe that purpose is so important. So even though I never put it on paper, again, until I wrote the book, I always felt that my purpose was directing me towards helping other people in whatever capacity I could. So I've always had, at least for the last 25, 30 years, positions where I could totally impact somebody's life in some way. Or I belong to organizations. A lot of companies have business resource councils that you can join with that intention of helping other people in your organization succeed. So my purpose statement isn't about what job should I have, and it never was about that for me either. I never pursued a job, but I did pursue feeling like I was growing. So whatever work it was, I always wanted to do work that I knew I would learn something new. So, not a very high bar, but I would say, okay, well, I've learned everything I can in this position. What can I do next? The other thing would be that I wanted to surround myself with people that I really cared about and that I thought cared about other people. That was really important to me. Again, not really knowing what my purpose was, but what I came to the conclusion as I was writing the book is that if you can think about purpose in terms of 3 statements, that it will at least help you directionally. And the first statement is an I want statement. So when you think about what a fulfilling life and career would be for you, what would you want to show up in that career and life? So, for example, for myself, I said, I want to be happy, healthy, able to work with people that I respect, and be present for those that I love. So that is a statement about what I want. Now, a lot of times we're really good at talking about what we don't want. And you probably talk to people, they'll give you, and some of your clients, maybe they'll give you a long list of things that they do not want, the things that they do not like. But it is a challenge to think about what is it that you really do want in terms of how do you want to feel about yourself? And, what kinds of things do you think directionally are right for you? Being healthy, for example. For me, I know that if I want to be healthy, I have to eat better. I have to exercise, and I hate exercising so much I can't even describe it. But if I want to be here to continue to do great work and to be around people that I love and to be there for them, I had better focus on that. So I was deliberate about putting it in my purpose statement that I want to be healthy. And I also want to work with people that I respect. 99.9% of people that I worked with have been, terrific. And I've learned from everybody. And there have been some people that weren't so terrific. And I don't ever want to have to work with them again. So at this stage of my career, I'm 60 years old now. I'm like, okay, I don't have to work with them. And that's one of the benefits of as you age, you can decide some of these things, who you want to work with and who you don't want to work with. And I would say for everyone, no matter what age, this is an important consideration. Don't just go after a job. Go after what, some of these experiences that you really want to feel. The next statement is when I'm at my best. So if you think about this concept of when you're at your very best, what does it look like from the outside to other people? So when I'm at my best, I know that I can love people and I can inspire them and I can enable them to do their best work. And that's very intriguing and invigorating to me. So think about what it is when you're at your best. What does that feel like, look like to others? And then lastly, I believe statement. So it's sort of like, why does this matter? And I actually have done several interviews over the last couple of months, and I've had some people say, why do you even care if people are authentic? Well, the reason is that I think that you can't really live your God-given purpose unless you show up as who you are in this life and that you stand for the things that really matter. Again, a lot of things don't really matter that we encounter in our day, but for the things that really do, you have to stand up for those things because otherwise, you've missed a great opportunity to change the world in some small way.
I completely agree with you. And that's a great way to encapsulate all of that. I'm a big believer in the 3 pillars of core confidence in my book and in my work are show up, stand up, speak up. So I have a lot of similarities. This is my book.
I know, I have it.
Oh, yay. So, for anybody who doesn't have it, I never promote it on this show, but that has been something that I've seen, like we really struggle with showing up, standing up, and speaking up. And if we can do those 3 things, we really can improve our lives. So I love the values, the pivotal moments, and your purpose statements, because it is easy to identify what you don't want. And we do that in our relationships, and we do it in our work. We do it everywhere.
Yeah.
So Vicki, tell us what you're creating now. What is going on in your life?
Well, I'm really so new to all of this. So I left my job back in March of 2020. And right after I left, I went to work with writing the book. So I spent 7 months doing that. And now I have started a coaching practice, so a leadership coaching practice, and it's called UBU LLC, but UBU Leadership Coaching. And I've gotten some clients now, so I'm working with them, and they're from all industries. So I'm really excited about doing the work there with them and helping them to find their purpose. And I am learning about all of this social media. I always was a casual Instagrammer and Twitter person and Facebook and all of that, but now it's a bigger part of my business, and I'm learning about that. And I'll be doing some workshops. I just did a workshop recently for the 100 Club in Chicago, and they support families of fallen first responders. So when you've gone through such a tragic, unexpected loss in your life, finding who you are and navigating a world that you weren't expecting to be your world does take a lot of work and effort. And I was glad to help them with that. So I don't know, a lot of things are coming up, I think. But I do feel like a novice for the first time in 42 years that I'm complete novice. I have so enjoyed the work of radio hosts and podcasters. I know how hard you work to put together content for your listeners, and I am so inspired by that. So maybe in a few years, when I feel like I've sort of captured the learning from that, maybe I'll go and do the same thing and keep watching all of you for inspiration.
That sounds great. And so do you have any other future plans of what your dream is for the future?
My dream is to stay healthy. The older I've gotten, the more I know that is such a gift. And I would like to think that I have many years left to go. So I'm working as hard as possible on that. I want to love the people in my life with everything that I have and want to be present for them. And, I want to be open to new experiences. So even with writing the book, I wasn't anticipating about writing about authenticity at all. So I'm a prayerful person, and I prayed that I wanted God to use me how he sees fit. And that prayer stands. I'm here for him to use me as he sees fit.
Beautiful. Thank you. So are you ready for the lightning round?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
I used to think I wasn't blank enough.
Smart enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I am by golly.
What was the number one thing holding you back from being a woman of value?
Fear. And I think that's true for most of us.
Mm-hmm. What's the best advice you can give to a woman who wants to become more empowered?
Understand fear for what it is. It's your own limiting beliefs. Conquer those, and you are well on your way.
Love it. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Doesn't matter how long it takes to achieve your goals. It just matters that you do.
You certainly are a living example of somebody who took a long time, and
a very long time.
But I love it, and I can relate to it. It took me about 6 years to graduate college, and I thought I was super old, and it took me way too long, but I had 5 jobs, and my goal was to live on my own and be independent and not live with my parents anymore. And it meant I had to work a lot of jobs and take night classes until I graduated. I switched schools 3 times. And, it's like we all have a different path. And I was an artist my whole life until I became a coach. And so I reinvented in my 50s. And I think it's never too late to find who you are and what drives you, especially when you are courageous enough to just tune into you instead of what society wants and what other people in your life have told you should be and you should do. Because when you tap into that, you really thrive.
Yes. And Sandy, you've been a great example, and your podcast is so wonderful. I've learned a lot about your story, and you've gone through a lot, and you still keep doing amazing things. So I know that there's even more on the horizon for you as well.
Oh, thank you. What is something that people often get wrong about you?
People think that I'm an extrovert because I talk a lot, and that things come easily for me. And I am an introvert, and I've had to work really, really hard for everything I've ever gotten in life.
Fellow introvert here.
Yes. You can spot one when you see one. So.
That's right. And I think a lot of people misunderstand the difference between introversion and extroversion. And that's why I love Susan Cain so much, who wrote Quiet. It's really about how we get our energy, how we recharge. And if we recharge in quiet, we're an introvert. And I'm sort of more of an ambivert, I think. But you can be extremely in the public eye, out there, public speaking. So many public speakers are introverts and they're exhausted after they speak, and they need to not be around people when they're done. And that's called self-care.
Yes, absolutely. It is. Yes. Claim it. It's good. It's fine.
It is. It's actually essential.
Yes, it is.
So finally, Vicki, how would you like to be remembered?
Someone who loved others with all her heart and wanted to make a difference in other people's lives.
Oh, beautiful.
Thank you.
So Vicki, this has been such a beautiful conversation.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. How can people find out more about you?
Well, Sandy, you can follow me at vickiznavor.com. That's VICKIZNAVOR.com. I have a blog that I write once a week, most weeks anyway. I'm about a 99% success rate there. I have a blog, and I'm on Instagram, Facebook, everything. But if you start at my website, you'll get some free downloads and other things as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing your gifts, and being an inspiration to those who needed to hear this story today.
Oh, thank you. And Sandy, I feel the exact same way about you. I appreciate your time.
If you would like to step more fully into your value, grab a free copy of The Ultimate Guide to Becoming a Woman of Value on my website, thewomanofvalue.com. Just click the link at the top of the homepage. And if you haven't already done so, be sure to click the subscribe button in your listening app. And if there's something in this episode that inspired you, please share it with others, because the more we share these inspirational stories, the more women of value we will have in this world. I'll see you next time.